In the early 1960s, Switzerland had 94% of the global watch market. If you did not own a Swiss watch, you were simply not in the first league of watch owners. The 6 largest watchmaking companies were Swiss-based. Omega was the biggest in the world, also the oldest, also the richest. Every year, even today, in September month, there's an annual fair in the city of Lucerne, a watchmaking exhibition. In 1963, they approached one of the young engineers, and Switzerland had more than 600 engineers in the watchmaking industry. This young engineer was approached, his name was Johann Bergman, by his company to represent them at this exhibition. They said to him, "You're the only guy in the company who at this moment do not have any project on your table, and we need a technician, an engineer, to answer some of the technical questions at this exhibition." And he tried everything to get out of it. He said to them, "Please, I'm not the guy for the job. For that you need to send a few beautiful young girls." They said, "No, they will also be there, but we need an engineer." And he said, "But it's not true that I have nothing to do. If you would allow me only 10 minutes at the board meeting, I want to show you what I'm busy with. I have this revolutionary concept in timekeeping." And he got it. He actually got his 10 minutes at the board meeting. And in preparation for it, he made 4 big posters. And in this 10 minutes, he ran through these 4 posters. He showed them a watch he designed with no gears and no springs in it. It works with quartz and a battery. And he ended his presentation by saying, "This thing cost 10 times less than the cheapest watch we can make. And it's 1,000 times more accurate than the most accurate one we've ever made." And they told him, "You know, you are talking to the board of the biggest, the richest, the strongest watchmaking company. This thing cannot fly. Very interesting and very innovative, but it will not fly." So very disloyal, he resigned his job. And he went to the biggest competition, another Swiss company. And he presented it to them. And this board said to him, "Your company might be the oldest and the biggest, but we are way ahead in technology. Believe us, this thing will not work." So with his last paycheck, he leased 4 square meters at that exhibition, and he went to the exhibition at the end. Not for his company, for himself there. And on the 3rd day of the exhibition, a Japanese guy from the company Seiko walked by, took an interest in these 4 posters, asked a lot of difficult questions, and invited him to Tokyo. 10 years later, 1973, this guy was the CEO of Seiko. And he made the keynote speech at the opening of that exhibition. And in that speech, he said that the quartz watch has taken 96% of the market. And the Swiss were left with just more than 2% globally. That after all the millions that the Swiss government and Swiss companies have spent in trying to catch up afterwards with Swiss quartz, they could never recapture what they had. Because there was a day, and it was the day when the idea was born, when it did not matter what you knew, how much you knew, what your experience was of gears and springs. All the meters went back to 0. All that mattered was how flexible you are. being big and strong and old and experienced can actually be to your detriment. Often, it keeps you from seeing the opportunities. Now, I believe with every cell in my body that this is the story about agriculture in Africa too. This is the continent with all the potential. This is where the land is and where the water is, where the climate is, and more important than anything else, this is the part which I loved most of Avgri's approach. This is the continent where the people are. With more than half of the population of this continent who are making a living from somewhere in the agricultural value chains. We all know that in a mere 30 years from now, we will need to feed 2 billion more people. And it's a tough job. We will have to produce more food in the next 30 years than all the food that's been produced by mankind since they started off with cropping in agriculture. It means a major paradigm shift in the way we think about food production, the way we think about ourselves and our industry, the way we think about the value chains. Very often people say, especially in the central and the western regions of our beautiful continent, very often you will hear them say, this is a pipe dream. If you know Africa, you will know this dream cannot materialize. The worst of it is that people are saying it about themselves. If it cannot materialize, then we've never had a future on this continent. Because the future of this continent is in agriculture. There is no other sector of the economy that can liberate Africa from hunger and poverty. If you find the time, read this book of Moeletsi Mbeki, the brother of the former president of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki, The Architects of Poverty. In this book, he looks at every sector of society and every sector of the economy of the continent, and he comes to the conclusion that agriculture in Africa is actually the only sector that's got the potential, not over the very long term, but even on the medium term, in the next 10 to 15 years, to slay the dragon of poverty. Because of the numbers of people it can accommodate. And because the backwardness of agriculture, the uncompetitiveness of agriculture on the continent today is not the brakes, it's the fuel. It opens up the opportunity to come from a very low base and actually create wealth. Now, it sounds like a very simple principle, but it's a principle which is not commonly understood on the continent. There's only one way to raise from a calf to a cow. Now, why has it not happened up to now? There are a few reasons which I want to touch on, but the most important of them has got nothing to do with agriculture. You see, agriculture is less about soil and climate and seeds and inputs and technology, and more about people. Agriculture is a people thing. If you do not start with the people practicing it, you will not develop the industry. It starts and ends with the people who are involved in it. The first reason why Africa has fallen behind has got to do with technology. You cannot, in a world that is growing smaller and smaller every day, where every continent is competing on the same markets every day of the year, where you are in competition with the best in the world, literally every day, you cannot fall behind on technology. And Africa has never been on par. What to say? Get their nose in the front. I once traveled through Sudan on my way to Egypt, and we stopped briefly for a biological break when I saw this farmer, smallholder, ploughing his fields with 2 oxen. And as he came by, I must have taken 100 pictures of him. I could not believe the technology, or actually, it's not the technology, it's the craftsmanship that went into making this plough of his. There was no metal in it. Everything was made of wood. And it was so strong. A little later in the day, as the sun was setting, we stopped again. And this time a farmer brought this plough out of the fields and he put it on the side of the road. This time I must have taken 200 photos of it. And I said to my companion, what craftsmanship. This guy is not a farmer, he's an artist. 2 days later, we visited the Museum of Cairo. And there I saw exactly the same plough, 3,000 years old. Nothing has changed. Everything else has changed in agriculture, but we are still using the implements which we used thousands of years ago. In the age of the Internet of Things and of big data and of machines speaking to each other through SIM cards, we must leapfrog. We cannot catch up. The way to go is actually to try to leapfrog into the future as we imagine it, and then work backwards to where we are now. But then, we also lack the infrastructure. What happened to this dream? Can you remember that you've been taught about it in school? This dream of a railway line from Cape Town to Alexandria, with a few sidelines, like the bones of a fish. What happened to that? Can you imagine if we could have had that kind of railroad, what it could have done to agricultural value chains, to get produce to markets, to link us up with the markets, to export our stuff? What happened to that? It is not beyond reality. Most of it already exists. I actually tried to follow the line on Google Earth. You need a few linkages here and there. Can you think what kind of wealth that can unlock? Because smallholders will never grow into commercial farmers if they cannot link up to markets. In the UN, and especially in the EU, many of the conferences on agricultural development in Africa, much is said about skills transfer, about teaching smallholder farmers to become commercial. Under this banner, the slogan of Confucius, don't dish out fish. Teach the recipients how to fish it for themselves. If it was that easy, it would have been done. There's something missing in the slogan. It's not only about stop dishing out fish, teach them to fish. We must add to it and give them a market for it. Because then you have a value chain. A value chain is only a chain because you cannot push it, you must pull it. Chain can only be pulled, and there's only one pulling force in a value chain, and that's the market. That's where you start off with. How sad that Africa trade in food and fiber less than 3% with itself. 97% of food and fiber that's traded on this continent comes from elsewhere. I recently walked on the market in Brazzaville, and to my surprise, I found a box of avocados on that market that comes from our valley. We have a cooperative which is doing the marketing of our avocados, and there was this box from our own valley. And I took photographs and I sent it to all my neighbors. Look what I found in Brazzaville. Till one guy SMS back, where did it come from? We've never sent anything to Brazzaville. It's true. From our valley, all the avocados go to Brussels. It is easier to trade between Brussels and Brazzaville than between Pretoria, Johannesburg, and Brazzaville. But then, you ask any of the guys who got onto their trucks and moved their equipment from Klerksdorp to Brazzaville, about the challenges to cross borders, about the months it takes to get anything cleared in Point Noir through the harbour, about what you spend on informal roadblocks and toll gates, and you will understand exactly why intra-Africa trade is in the sad condition it is. It is a human problem. It's got nothing to do with the continent. It's a governance thing. Governance is the key to unlocking the wealth of agriculture on this continent. I want to say it again, listen clearly. Governance is the key to unlock the wealth of Africa. I've been criticized many times for having spent more than half of the budget of Sakao on governance training. But then, there's no better investment you can do than training leaders amongst farmers on how to properly run an organization or a business. Good governance. If I could have my opportunity in Sakao over again, because my shelf life is limited, if I could have it over again, I would have spent more on governance. The next challenge is about the spirit of competitiveness, entrepreneurship, agriculture as a business. In way too many of the countries in Africa, when people speak about farmers, they actually mean poor peasants. There's a million miles between a poor peasant and a farmer. I recently asked one of my workers, who was very annoyed with the way the ball is bouncing for us on land reform. I said to him, well, why didn't you become a beneficiary of land reform? You're a better farmer than me. Most of what I know about farming, you taught me. You can run your own farm. He said, no, I cannot. I might be a much better farmer than you are. He said, but I do not understand the telephone part of this business. And it's so true. Farming is a business. When I wanted to study to be a farmer, school level, my father talked me out of it. He said to me, you will never be a farmer because a farmer must have a farm. You never buy a farm, you inherit it or you will not have it. And you're not going to inherit one. You must follow an academic career. I said to him, but maybe I will be lucky one day. Maybe I can afford one. He said, no, because a farmer is a scientist. And look at your marks in science. I said, well, I think I can improve on that. He said, a farmer is an engineer. Things break every day and you need to fix it. You've got 10 thumbs. He said, and a farmer, it's got green fingers. You have no interest in the garden. He said, a farmer is a human resources manager. Your relationship with your brother and sisters, not what I would call the best. He said, you've got nothing that will make you a good farmer. 30 years later, when he visited me one day, I said, do you remember you said, I have nothing that can make me a good farmer? He said, yes, I was wondering about it. You know, how on earth do you manage the planning of your fertilizer and your chemicals? I said to him, professional people work in those companies and they advise you on the farm. The only skill you really need to be a successful farmer is business skills, because a farm is a business. If you understand that part, the rest can be added. But if you don't understand that part, you will not survive as a farmer. Farming must become businesses in Africa. Now that you will not accomplish within one generation. It's very true what Avgri, what Vaughan alluded to. You do not make a farmer in one generation. You need the Abba, you need the father. If it is not for the skills or the expertise, the experience, the knowledge, then it is for the emotional framework to deal with farming. This is the only career where you're actually also in competition with nature itself, with the climate. So you do not get born into that. You're not a farmer from birth. It takes a generation of more. You can see it with the average successful farmer in South Africa. It's a second or a third generation farmer. But you can graft professionalism on smallholder farming. I'm a fruit farmer. On my farm, every day of the year, we graft new varieties of avocados or mangoes or lychees onto old rootstock. Now, the existing rootstock in Africa is the smallholder framework. If you can graft professionalism, commercialization, mechanization, modernization onto that, then you can eradicate poverty and hunger. And this is what Agri-All Africa is all about. And I want to be very clear about it. Agri-All Africa is not a mass-based organization. It's not an organization that's competing for membership. We do not dream of having hundreds of thousands of members all over the continent. We do not want to be a voice for all the farmers in Africa. That's the job of PAFU in our region of Sakau. Agri-All Africa strives to be the home for those farmers, business-minded entrepreneurs who's got the heart to go into Africa and be grafted on the existing rootstock, to engage with the people on the land and ensure that they grow hand in hand with the people who are farming there now. We do not want to promote only ourselves. We want to promote the communities in Africa. There is no insurance policy you can take out. Not even the guys of Sanlam and the Mutual here. There is no insurance policy to take out to survive in Africa. There's only one insurance policy, and that is by investing in the communities between whom you are going to farm in future. You want to use the land, you marry those people. It's a long-term relationship. You sit with them under a tree, sometimes for weeks on end, and you negotiate a deal. And you tell them exactly what you expect from them and what they can expect from you. And your contribution is to help them to create wealth. You can do it there because you've done it here. If you did not make it in South Africa, don't think Zambia is a better option. People are not running away from South Africa. You are running towards Africa. I've been in 42 countries in Africa over the last 3 years. If I can choose a farm anywhere, it will be a difficult choice because of the rich soils of Uganda, the wonderful waters in the Great Lakes area, the beautiful climate, especially in Congo, North and Brazzaville. But that is not why you choose a farm. We have wonderful soils elsewhere which you cannot farm because of policy environment. If I can choose a farm in Africa because of the policy environment, because of the people and the leadership, the stability and the politics, without hesitation, I will choose that farm in Zambia. It's the most comfortable policy environment at this stage because of the accessibility of decision makers, because of the opportunity to do advocacy, to influence policy, the dialogue, and this is also why we have founded Agri-All Africa the way we have done so, because of the value system. I will choose that farm in Zambia because of the value system. Because the leaders of that country know where their help comes from. They know they cannot seek solutions if you do not start by seeking it on your knees. Yes, there are many challenges. It's not a corruption-free country. No country in Africa is corruption-free. It's not without its challenges on infrastructure. No country in Africa is. But if that is your approach, and this is why I asked the question this morning to the Senegal operation, why Zambia? It makes me think of this story, and you can read it again in Numbers is it Numbers 13, verses 1 to 33, where Joshua came to the borders of this promised land, Canaan. And he sent 12 spies in there. Go and have a look what it is like in that country. And 10 of them came back. And they said, no, we will not survive there. These people, they are giants. They will crush us. All the conditions, it's terrible. And 2 said, yes, might be true. But if you guys noticed what kind of fruit and veggies we can grow there. This is the story of agriculture in Africa. Yes, there are so many challenges. All of them are real. All of them are true. But there's only one way to grow this continent to its fullest potential. And that is by recruiting those who have a heart and a love for this soil. Those of us who were made of this very soil, this continent, to take up those challenges. In Afrikaans we have the saying, to take the bull by the horns and wrestle him down. And that is not one man's job and not one generation's job. But if we do not start with it, it's not going to happen ever.